Canada is ranked one of the 5 best countries in the world this year. You're probably shocked given the current state of things. Let's take a look at this ranking and see who did well and who not so much. And at the end of this video, I will share how you can make this ranking relevant to you specifically. US News & World Reports publishes this ranking annually, and while Canada is in the top 5, it actually lost 2 positions since the last year. In 2023, Canada was ranked 2nd best country in the world to live in. This year, it's 4th. What made it slide down? To produce this ranking, 17,000 people were surveyed across 36 nations, so only a third of the countries represented actually shared their first-hand experience on the country. They were asked to evaluate each country according to 70 unique attributes, which were later combined in 11 categories to get the final ranking. Some of the items that were evaluated here were things like cultural influence, quality of life, entrepreneurship, and others. But not all categories were created equal. Denmark, New Zealand, UK, Germany, Sweden, and Australia are closing off the top 10 best countries to live in. Interestingly, Sweden has dropped the most since last year. It previously ranked 3rd best. It is considered a social utopia by many.
Sweden is sort of infamous for having the highest taxes in the world. A quite large proportion of tax money goes into education, healthcare for children, parental leave, and parental support.
But something didn't go quite right this year.
Sweden is struggling to accommodate 165,000 people. The country's generosity has left it struggling.
A once peaceful Nordic nation has become the gun murder capital of Europe.
It happens so that Sweden has taken in a significant number of immigrants and refugees in recent years, and it just could not keep up with the challenges related to social integration and public health care. As a result, the country saw a sharp spike in crime rates. It's gotten so bad that Sweden is now offering $34,000 to migrants to voluntarily leave the country.
Take the money and leave, please. The Swedish government is offering to pay immigrants $34,000 if they go back to their home country.
Another notable change here is Denmark. Another near social utopia. It actually jumped up by 3 spots, making it to the top 10 for the first time. In fact, it ranked absolute first in individual quality of life and social purpose categories. With free education and emphasis on work-life balance, Denmark ranks among the happiest countries in the world and has one of the lowest income inequality rates. Well done, Denmark. So Canada ranks 4th overall. But if you look at the category breakdown, it's not ranking too high across the board. Where it did really well is agility and social purpose. What does that even mean? According to their own definition, agility is the country's ability to adapt and respond to whatever obstacle it faces. It's a country efficient in its actions, adoption, and acceptance of modern solutions. Do you think that sounds like Canada? Let's dig in. Responsive and modern are the criteria that got the near highest rating here. Do you think Canada is modern? Looking strictly at this metric, it ranked 6th behind Japan, Germany, and France. Technologically, Canada is very far behind Europe, not to mention Asia. However, if we talk about novelty of infrastructure and construction, yeah, one might say that Canada is modern, simply because most of the country has been built out recently, relative to the rest of the world that boasts centuries of conquest and development. So in the context of the countries in this list, it kind of might just make sense to consider Canada modern? Canada ranks absolute first in responsive category as well, with US and New Zealand right behind. I actually think that this country is pretty responsive to what's going on in the world and in this country. The population is growing fast, so you have no choice but to adapt. Whether or not those responses are reasonable and adequate for the issues at hand and its population, that's another question that we won't get to in this video. There's always someone benefiting from every single policy that comes out. Social purpose is another interesting criteria where Canada ranks relatively high. It's 3rd, right after Denmark and Sweden. Both countries are regarded as some of the most successful social welfare states, where all aspects of the country's economy and productivity are not in fact compromised as a result of vast social policies. Both countries get free healthcare, education, generous time off, and parental benefits for its citizens, but at the same time enjoy highest personal income taxes in Europe.
55%. both of which are well above the OECD average.
I wonder if Canadians would be open to higher personal income tax if it meant better healthcare and free education. Let me know in the comments. According to this ranking, Canada is already pretty close to these two countries. Ideologically, it has similarly progressive views on religion, human rights, and natural preservation. Nature and wilderness is in fact one of the biggest assets that I hope Canada keeps paying as much attention to. Many of our viewers from Europe and beyond highlight this about Canada a lot. And sadly, there are fewer and fewer places in the world that are still uncultivated by man. There is not a single unturned rock in Europe anymore from the centuries of cultivation and conquest, which led to near elimination of wildlife in the region. By the way, this social purpose category is one of the 3 heaviest weighted criteria in this survey, with the other 2 being quality of life and entrepreneurship. And I know what you're probably thinking.
Growing number of residents are finding it difficult to make ends meet.
The average rent in our country hitting an all-time high in the month of May, topping $2,200 a month for the first time ever.
25% of Canadians cannot afford 2 or more household essentials, putting them below the poverty line.
Our quality of life has fallen so much that it shouldn't even have made it to the top 10 list. Well, maybe it's not that bad in comparison to other countries. Let's see. Well, that sounds about right. So affordability is horrible, according to the survey, but at least you have relative economical and political stability, at least for now. We've got a good public system, even though healthcare struggles a bit. This report actually shows that Canada's healthcare system is faring better than the UK and Japan, which, spoiler alert, ranked overall 2nd best country. It also is doing better than Australia and the United States. You're probably really surprised by that, so I will stress that this report focuses on how well developed the public healthcare system is. If the country runs a private or hybrid healthcare program like the US or Portugal, for instance, this report will completely ignore that. Entrepreneurship is the most disappointing aspect for me personally for Canada. As a founder, this is pretty much the reality. Canadian investors, both private and institutional, are highly conservative and risk-averse. And that trumps not just productivity, but also all ambitions that young founders and entrepreneurs may have about making that change in the world. The latest capital gains changes for corporations and individuals, raising the inclusion rate to 66%, have put an even bigger dent into the entrepreneurial community, further alienating ambitious founders and discouraging investors who seek to make good profits from their investments. This change doesn't affect the wealthy that much, but surely affects those still climbing the ladder. With the US as our neighbor, I think it's imperative that this country focuses on building and supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Otherwise, most talented and ambitious will simply cross the border down south. And it's already happening en masse. The US, in turn, was ranked 2nd best country in entrepreneurship, only behind Germany. Germany, being super pedantic and organized, have a strong infrastructure to support startups with funding, mentorship, and other business opportunities. Being the largest economy in Europe, it consistently invests 3% of its GDP into research and development and innovation. In contrast, Canada invests only half of that. Canada is not perfect, but it does fare better than most world's countries according to this specific report. As we evaluate the top 3 countries in this ranking, each has its own bouquet of issues actually. Japan, ranking 2nd, is suffering from labor shortages due to aging population, economic decline, and an unforgiving work culture. At the same time, it climbed by 4 spots. It was 6th last year. It scored high this year in entrepreneurship, cultural influence, and it did pretty well across the board. The United States faces political instability, gun violence, illegal immigration, health epidemic, and cost of living issues. Yet, it is enough for it to rank high in power, agility, and entrepreneurship and cultural influence to land a 3rd spot in the top 10 world's best countries. Lastly, Switzerland, the wonderful land of mountains and lakes, where we might retire someday. It was ranked the best country last year, and the year before, and in 2020. Did Switzerland sponsor this ranking? It's quite a phenomenon. It doesn't particularly score too high in neither category, except for quality of life and open for business, which measures how attractive the country is for overseas investors. Tax haven. Switzerland boasts high quality of life and is considered the safest and the least corrupt country in this list. But even Switzerland's #1 ranking doesn't mean that it's perfect. The country is one of the absolutely most unaffordable countries in this list, including a reportedly unaffordable and inefficient healthcare system. It is a highly bureaucratic country too. Expats living there highlight difficulties integrating as a foreigner, conservative attitudes, and resistance to change. Not to mention the environmental crisis, which has recently drawn attention from the European Court of Human Rights, who's ruled that Switzerland's climate inaction, in fact, violated human rights. Oh, and apparently there's nothing to do except for enjoying lakes and mountains. Despite all of that, the Swiss folk seems to have figured it out, at least according to this ranking. If you live in Switzerland, let me know if it's really all rainbows and butterflies. No country in this list is perfect. The ranking outcomes aren't perfect either. But there is one thing that I absolutely love about this report. This ranking and their methodology is the perfect methodology for all of us to find the best country to live in. We don't just blindly look at this ranking and take it at the face value, but we can look at the categories and criteria and decide what matters to us the most, as well as what we're willing to compromise on. And we can construct our own ranking of the best countries for us to live in. The best country for you might look very different from the best country for us, and that's okay. I might value nature, safety, and public services and don't mind a higher income tax, while others will prefer a country with more conservative traditions that lure you in with lower taxation benefits. I always find it curious how passionately people like to debate how much Canada sucks and how awesome some other country might be. But the truth is, nobody will ever win a debate of this kind, because at the end of the day, home is where you personally feel most at home, no matter what somebody else says. Where do you feel most at home? Let me know below. And if you want to support this channel and see more content about how to feel at home, no matter the difficulties, consider becoming a member here or on Patreon. We also have a newsletter dedicated to personal and career growth. You can subscribe to it by scanning the QR code below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.